I'd now like to introduce Israel Belfer, who is a PhD student in Science, Technology, and Society program here at Bar-Ilan University, Machon Hagavoa L'Torah.
I have no slides. I'm actually not doing anything down here. Hello. Can everybody hear? I am not going to try to explain fundamental things about Golem. We have the absolute authority to all things Golem. I'm not going to try to convince you of any rabbinical point, which we also have an absolute authority here. So as a student, as we just said, I'm only going to try to make one or two points that are peripheral to the point but might be helpful for discussion. The first point, it might be the only point, is the title of this panel. It's a modern golem. And when I say modern, I want to take that concept seriously. What would be the difference between a modern golem and golem in general? So I'm not going to try to explain the golem in general, only that the atmosphere in which we would encounter golem stories in the past, pre-modern golem, would assume a nature, an absolute and immutable nature that the only way to mute, to change, would be through a higher order, invoking letters of a powerful alphabet, invoking higher forces, and then changing nature. Now, that holds in many minds until today. It's still there. We're still searching for things about nature. Nature is still out there. It's still happening. Stars far away, things are still exploding, and it's not as if everything is a human construct. But what has changed is that there's a change in the default scenario for how we approach nature, how we approach the world where we act. And that's a very important aspect ethically, philosophically, especially religiously. And that change of default is that today it's very difficult to find an appreciation of nature as something that deserves an existence on its own. Meaning, today, to say that, how about we just procreate normally? That is beginning to sound more and more avant-garde. Today, in Huxley's Brave New World, you have nature reserves for people who procreate normally, who are wild genetically, because you want to keep them wild. And that nature reserve is just as artificial as the concrete buildings and the genetically engineered people that aren't allowed on that reservation because you want to keep it pure. Take the Hula wetlands as case in point. So even nature itself is becoming an artificial reserve in the sense that it's not something that that you're trying to just protect because because it deserves protecting, but because there's a very large measure of confusion about where we're going, what we're trying to achieve by the constant development of what we can do with the knowledge that we gather. That's one point about the golem being modern, and that modernity is that we're approaching extreme scenarios that actually, in some ways, surpass what's going on in the classic, or at least the folk stories about the golem, not the major stories about a huge anthropomorph. But there are no warning bells. There is no feeling that we're breaking something cosmic in doing that, and unlike in the classic golem stories. And that is actually more dangerous than if there were warning bells. I mean, I'd be more scared of going into a nuclear factory that doesn't have like those yellow flashlights going off in alarms. If there's nothing there, if there's no danger signs, then that means that something is amiss in the way we appreciate what, in that case, energy is, and in this case, how we make chimeras. The second point, and I'll be very brief about this point, is that we live in an information age, and we're going to hear in a second about that. And in this information age, something has happened that actually does a return to the classic golem. And this is the opposite of what I just said. A return to the classic golem in the sense that the classic golem invokes letters of the alphabet, language as a creator, a magical creator of the world, and that's just one aspect of the golem. And then afterwards, when you go into modernity and you go into modern science, then you're not trying to create the world by speaking to it or by speaking it. You describe it, you give models, you give equations. But what we're encountering in current trends in science, in many aspects of science, is an appreciation of information as a fundamental object that sits at the bottom of things, or the circumference of things, depends who you ask. And there, information is no longer just a descriptive element, but a prescriptive element. Just like in a computer code, it's not just a document or a message, it's a crystallized algorithm, it's a process, which is, and this is a deeper philosophical point, but it closes the circle that I opened earlier with modernity being different than the classical golem. This actually brings us back around to the classical golem. It's no longer like combinations of two letters from the 22-letter alphabet. It's 4 nucleotides, but it's still manipulation of information in a modern version. Thank you very much.